We need someone, people, that would stand up and not just talk with the rhetoric, but would give us concrete solutions. And if we can say it's not fair, and we have a right sometimes to say, Lord, why?
So Xanax, calcium, rum, $60, young man dead, and you with the rest of your life in prison.
Would you have been happier if it had been the death sentence instead of life?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because he's still alive. He gets to make friends. He gets to go to Christmas dinner. That's not fair. He deserves to die.
Oh, his eye is mighty eye is on the little spur.
How many times did you hit her? 10, 20, 30, 40?
I say about 30 plus.
Did he ever threaten to kill you?
Yes. Told me if I left him, he would kill me and cut me up in small pieces. Put me in a black bag and bury me up in the mountains.
Remember how old you were when you were first asked to join a gang?
12, 11.
Joy, what would someone 11 years old do in a gang?
Sell drugs for them.
It's not tough to be in a gang and pull a trigger and do something cowardly like that. It doesn't take any toughness to sell drugs. It's tough to wake up every day and go to work and be responsible.
This was the funeral for Evans Jean, an innocent casualty in the war we are waging against ourselves, the war of American violence. Evans was 20 when he was buried in New York on February 8th last year.
Since that day, we have covered this war on the front lines that run all across this nation. We are not talking here about serial killings or mass murder. They're just a tiny fraction of the violence in this country. The true story of this war is being told every day in America's communities and courtrooms. Tonight, Ed Bradley, Dan Rather, and I will take you there, to the homes and the neighborhoods, some almost destroyed, others where parents, police, and teachers just refuse to surrender. This story is told in the names of the victims, of their parents, their friends, and families. And in their faces, you will see the fear that stalks all of us, and especially poor Black and Hispanic Americans who are in the greatest danger. Wars always claim young lives, and so far in the 90s we can count 15,000 teenagers lost forever in the killing fields of America.
CBS reports. Tonight, in the killing fields of America, with Mike Wallace, Ed Bradley, and Dan Rather.
The violence must be stopped, and our work has just begun.
Violence troubles every president.
Right here in this nation's capital, we can confidently say today that we are finally beginning to win the war against crime.
Time has come to give equal weight on the scale of justice to the rights of the innocent victims of crimes of violence.
Of our cities and the destiny of our nation.
Society has a right to protect itself and the potential victims of crime from those who prey on the innocent.
The Attorney General to advise America's prosecutors to end plea bargaining for violent federal firearms offenses.
Violent crime and the fear it provokes are crippling our society.
Last September 13th, President Clinton signed the new crime bill into law. 2 months earlier in Washington, a single act of violence cost Donna McDaniels, her husband, Shirley Monroe, her son, and Daphne and Geneva, their father, Earl McDaniels. By all accounts, a good and God-fearing man.
Thank God for Earl. Thank God for his boldness and his brashness. I told Donna after it happened, I said, you know, if Earl had been of another temperament, he probably would have been still alive.
He was raised in a church. He knew the fear of God.
Kind man?
Kind, gentle.
Considerate?
Considerate.
Always there for you?
Always.
A rock?
A rock.
But right now we know that Sister McDaniel has been faced with some difficult and some dark moments.
He was a family man. All he wanted to do was take care of his children and me. He loved security work. Couldn't get him out of security. No reason at all.
Earl McDaniels was killed last July, a few hours after starting his midnight shift as a private security guard at this D.C. housing complex. His wife tells us that on his last evening at home, he'd tucked his youngsters into bed as usual, and that when he left for work, he was carrying what he always carried, his gun and his Bible. But neither could save him from the killers sent by drug dealers at 3 o'clock the next morning. They shot him in the back of the head.
A month later, police arrested this suspect, age 19, and another fellow, just 16 years old.
How did you feel when you learned that a couple of teenagers had killed him?
It hurts because how can I tell my kids that another child killed their father? And the first thing Geneva would say, Mommy, Daddy, wouldn't bother nobody.
We're committed to doing everything we can to bring him justice. You know that.
Well, not only you're committed, but we as a family is committed to bringing justice for him, too.
Earl's sister, Robin, was also his best friend. She's vigilant in making sure the prosecutors stay on this case.
Yeah, I just don't want Earl to be another statistic. He's not a young Afro-American male that's died on the streets of Washington.
Do you plan to go to the court when these youngsters go on trial?
Yes, I do. Every day.
Were it possible, would you want the death sentence for these two?
No, I wouldn't.
Why?
I don't believe in a death sentence because I think there's a higher being and their judgment day will come.
When Earl McDaniels was dying, the ambulance took him to D.C. General Hospital. Washington's been called the murder capital. It averages about 450 killings a year, but at least 5 times that number are shot or stabbed and survive.
Please tell someone to get over here quick.
The trauma surgeon, Dr. Keith Sanders, is in the hospital parking lot to meet a car that has come here directly from a gunfight.
I'm here to do one thing, to affect the mortality rate in this community.
All right, tell me to get the intubation.
The teenager on the gurney was shot moments ago. The bullet is still in his head. He could die in the next minute.
Where's respiratory? Okay, get your clothes on.
Give me a mask. You got a collar and a mask.
These are the things that people don't really realize are going on in streams in inner city emergency rooms all over this country.
What was it, a drive-by shooting?
To be honest with you, I don't even get into the story very often because it's for me to deal with trying to save him. Okay, give it right away.
Dr. Sanders' father was a policeman, his mother a teacher. He went to a top Ivy League university and could probably work at any medical institution in the country, but for the past 6 years he's been here at the D.C. General Emergency Room.
So we're just brewing up a bigger storm. You know, we haven't reached the end of this either. I have a feeling that the impoverishment will get worse, and so the crimes will get worse and they'll get more heinous. And that's why you're seeing 13-year-olds killing 13-year-olds in this town.
Whose child is this? Anybody know? And that bullet is lodged on the right. So he crossed the midline.
The CAT scan is discouraging, the damage so terrible that there may be nothing left to do. But there are hopeful signs, and these are what Keith Sanders is looking for, the twitch of a reflex. This would be a very young life to lose.
And getting the benefit of the doubt.
Give him a chance, that's right.
He's 16, too.
That's right.
The operation takes 2 hours. When it's over, the boy is in a coma.
Think he's going to make it?
I'm praying for him, let's put it that way. He's a 16-year-old. He has a very bad injury. The prognosis is very poor.
It seems so stupid.
That's how we feel every night.
You've got an 8-year-old son yourself, and I can just see you thinking, there but for the grace of God.
I see my son every time these young men come in. I see my son there, and that's the reason why I'm here. More than anything else is because someone's got to be here to receive them and hopefully give them 100%.
The trauma room is like some awful grandstand from which to view the grim parade of urban violence.
You have an arterial bleeder here.
Night after night they pass by, people stabbed or shot, and sometimes more than once.
1,
19.
2, 3.
Our team's been here 2-3 days. We've seen, what, a dozen shootings?
Probably that.
All kinds of mayhem. What in the dickens is going on in this town? This is one hospital in Washington, D.C.
Well, it's like a low-level war going on.
21-year-old female, 9mm from the passenger seat. She was sitting in the car with the gentleman. What it looks like is it went through her left breast, in and out of her left arm.
Many of the patients who come here have no money and no place else to go. DC General is operating under a deficit of almost $100 million, in part because treating violence costs a lot of money.
The people who come here to DC General, do they have health insurance? Who pays for all this?
I'm paying, you're paying, everybody's paying.
And how many of these do you see a week or a month or a year?
We had a night where I think I pronounced 3 people dead within maybe an hour's period of time in that major trauma room downstairs, single gunshots to the head. And they were basically brain dead on arrival in that emergency room.
Young people or older people?
Oh, we're not talking about anybody over than 19.
Sir, you want to argue with me and it's your life on the line, so go ahead and kill me then. Kill me.
They arrive bleeding, dying, and often very angry.
What's your name? Write your name down.
My name is on every piece of paper that's yours.
Hey, I'm playing. Y'all going to court after the night.
They're nasty to you, son.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, again, I think it's that I represent an institution. It's not me personally.
Did you hear me say that? Did you hear me say? Did you hear him say that? Did you hear me say? Did you hear him say that?
Don't get into it.
Man, yeah, don't get into it. I got y'all conspiracy. Yeah.
Doesn't it ever get to you?
Oh, without question, it gets to me.
Don't you want to say, you little...
See, I don't believe that all those people are worthless, even when they are cursing at me.
Man, why you arguing? Hey, y'all want to hurt me, man?
No, sir. The person who wanted to hurt you shot you already, okay? I'm floating in a pool of blood, and I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I mean, basically, these children, we can put them in the operating room and do some things to help them. Some of them will survive, some of them won't. Some of them will maybe handicapped for the rest of their lives. But whatever we're doing is nowhere near as good as prevention.
In fact, prevention is all that might have saved that 16-year-old you saw earlier who was shot on the head. A week after Dr. Sanders worked so hard to save him, he died.
Where'd they shoot you?
R.I.P.
Oh, my. Right down the middle.
Yeah.
A year ago, 22-year-old Dwayne Bellamy was shot 13 times. He doesn't know his father, hasn't seen his mother since he went to a foster home at age 8. That didn't last either. A lot of his childhood was spent on the streets. Both of his brothers are dead, shot. Dwayne is better off, but not by much. One of the bullets that hit him severed his spine. He's a quadriplegic. He'll spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair.
What was life like for you before you got shot?
Fast, nice, enjoyable.
What made it fast, nice, and enjoyable?
The money, the fame, everything came with it. The drug life.
You liked the drug life. You sold drugs, you made money, spent it. How much money did you used to make?
$3,000 a night.
20. You kidding me?
Mm-mm.
And
And they shot you 13 times?
Yeah.
What were they up to? Why?
I don't know, jealousy, envy. Somebody want me around.
You lie in bed and you say to yourself,
you just ask yourself, why me? Every day. Which one we doing?
We'll go slow.
Dwayne spent 5.5 months at the National Rehabilitation Hospital. The woman who taught him how to live as he will have to is Janice Fisher. She was his first therapist here, and he was one of her first violence patients.
Okay, when you're backing off the curb, don't forget to lean forward.
When you first saw this guy, and you knew that he was going to be your patient, afraid a little bit?
I think I was a little bit afraid. I was worried about how he'd respond to me asking him to do something, whether he would resist me or, and how I was going to handle that. He didn't talk much. He would be carrying the conversation the whole time. He didn't respond. You know, he seemed kind of pissed off at the world.
I mean, when they first said, this is going to be the person who's going to help you through this rehabilitation, what did you think?
Thought it was going to be hard, a lot of fussing and disagreeing and all that. Because I had a lot of bad experience with white nurses.
So stretch your legs out?
Yeah.
They had almost nothing in common. Janice, well cared for and loved all of her comfortable life. Dwayne, poor and without parents, growing up amid violence and drugs.
I definitely feel as though meeting Dwayne has shown me a world with such violence that there are good people in that world. It's not all evil, and that a lot of it is just the circumstances of the environment.
Has he been a good patient? Or no?
I don't know. Good patient is a big word. He's been difficult. The difficult part for me has been motivating him, and I think it's disappointing for me at times because I see so much potential. He has such a great ability to move. Like if you think about, you know, he had a gunshot to his right elbow, and then he can't straighten his elbow all the way, he can't extend his wrist all the way. He's basically moving his whole body with just one arm and his head and his upper chest.
This is America? At the end of the 20th century? People shooting each other? Mothers paying no attention to their kids? Fathers taking off? You don't care about selling drugs, it's illegal, but I'm going to get mine? What happened? This is not what it's supposed to be about. What happened, Dwayne?
People gave up.
The building's burning, and you need to get out quick.
By the time Dwayne was released from the hospital, his medical bills totaled more than $500,000.
Okay.
He'll need nursing and therapy for as long as he lives. And if you wonder what kind of life will be possible, take a look at Chris Crowder. His medical treatment has cost $1 million so far. He needs a nurse every day, and when one doesn't come, he must call a friend to help clean and medicate his bed sores, a deadly threat for spinal cord patients. He's had 2 skin grafts already and needs another one now. All this, and constant pain since the day that he was shot 4 years ago.
I'm still wrestling with it because I had problems with my heels, skin sores, everything that could have happened to me happened to me. I had temperatures that would shoot into 103 for days, loss of weight, gain of weight, and depression.
He was a 28-year-old teacher, a graduate of Howard University, working his way toward law school. He was walking home through this neighborhood playground when he says 3 teenagers who were counting drugs or money mistook him for a cop and shot him.
What would you tell him if you were to meet these boys?
Man, do you know how much you've sidelined me? Do you know how much it cost me and how much it's costing me now? Do you know how much pain I have to go through certain days? How I feel when I wet myself? How embarrassed it is? How I have to go through some days not knowing if I'm going to make it?
And they'd laugh at you.
Probably would. In fact, some kids do.
Okay, Greg, let her defibrillate real quick.
Every day at D.C. General, Keith Sanders and his colleagues struggle with human brutality and bureaucratic indifference. Many of the patients can't pay, and city budget cuts always threaten the hospital. But the real balance sheet, Dr. Sanders says, measures human costs.
What was the PO2 in that blood gas, by the way? 30.
I'm very cognizant that I'm standing on that edge of success and failure. The successes look great on your record.
Stop for a minute.
That's
it. The failures are things that you must deal with also. That's enough. That's enough.
Thank you.
Sorry, brother.
So when I see the tragedy that's around me, I mean, there's so much in this book. Again, this is a brewing pot for horror and terror. It really reminds me when I walk out there. I'm lucky to be walking this earth.
Remember the family of that security guard, Earl McDaniels, who was murdered last July? When the doctors at D.C. General turned off his life support system, they asked the family to make a difficult decision.
They asked if we wanted to think about donating some of Earl's organs. I said that I would love for someone to have Earl's heart because he had a good heart. He had laughter. He lived. And that's what I want to see him do now, live.
In somebody else.
In someone else.
When the buildings block out the mountains, Denver looks a lot like other cities. And in many ways it is. These Denver neighborhoods are made up of family homes and hope, and sometimes failure and fear as well. Long before the O.J. Simpson case got everyone talking about domestic violence, Denver was listening to the thousands of women who call for help each month. Their men are beating them, sometimes killing them. Family violence can start early and run for generations.
Inevitably, the question always comes up, how many children do you have? I always say 2. I have a son who's 26, and I have a daughter who would have been 25, but she was killed 3 years ago.
Ginger Green, her husband, and son will never truly feel complete as a family again because, except for old pictures and movies and memories, Margot is gone.
She was a ray of sunshine in our life. She was the exuberant one, the one that always kept us going and livened the party and kind of like a cheerleader for the family.
Margot does sound like a parent's ideal, popular and outgoing, a cheerleader who always studied hard and was always first in her class, a perfect daughter, until when she was 14, she met and fell in love with a man named Eric Preuss. He was 21. 3 years later, they were engaged.
We immediately said, no, I mean, you shouldn't get married. You haven't even started your senior year of high school. Give yourself a chance.
But they did get married, and soon there were disturbing signs of trouble.
He called her fatso and took food away off of her plate, and she barely weighed 90 pounds. He called her stupid and dummy on a regular basis, and she was getting straight A's.
After 3 years, Margot finally realized Eric's love was actually emotional abuse. But leaving him and moving into her own apartment would mean even greater danger.
About a week after she was in the apartment, he broke in about 2 o'clock in the morning and went to the kitchen and got a knife and threatened her, put the knife to her stomach.
She moved back to her parents' house, and a judge ordered Eric to stay away. Her family thought Margot was finally safe, not knowing that sometimes when the victim tries to flee, the abuser becomes more enraged. On a May morning in 1991 in downtown Denver traffic, Eric smashed his car into Margot's. When she got out, he shot her 7 times, and then used the same gun, a Tech-9 semi-automatic, on himself. Both of them died. Margot Green is not an isolated case. In Colorado alone, almost 24 women are killed each year by men who once claimed to love them. And going to court often didn't help. Women living in fear said it often left them feeling intimidated and overwhelmed. So the court in Denver, in an effort to try to save these lives, decided to make things easier.
This is courtroom 303W of the Civil Division. Judge Jacqueline St. John presiding.
Good afternoon. Please be seated and welcome.
You won't hear many judges say welcome that way, but Jacqueline St. John says the women who come here should feel that someone wants to listen to them.
He's punched me, he's bruised and broken my ribs, he spits on me, he kicks me in the head.
And he's caused you to have black eyes and broken ribs?
This is one of the few courts in the entire country that is set up just for restraining orders, judicial rulings that abusers must stay away from those they abuse.
He stole my car last night, and he took one of my kids when he did it.
And how old is she?
She's 4 years old.
Has he threatened to kill you?
Yes.
Has he threatened the children?
He's threatened the daughter that he has now.
A threat to kill very often will accompany or precede an act of violence, and the fear is very, very real. I see very scared but courageous people every day speaking out loud something they've never talked about before.
He struck me several times in the face. My 12-year-old daughter had to jump out a bedroom window and go get help.
Are those the marks on your face?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you approach the bench, please?
You often ask women to approach the bench.
Well, anyone that I see beginning to cry, anyone I see beginning to get a look on their face that is vulnerable. There's about 15 feet between me and that podium, and sometimes that's just too far to really communicate with another human being about something so tender.
My eardrum was ruptured.
Your eardrum was ruptured.
Something.
Are you having trouble hearing?
A little bit.
Often, the route to Judge St. John's courtroom begins on the streets of Denver.
Hear that man. And my 3 kids, I got 2 kids crying.
On one night patrol, Officer Colin Reese might answer a half-dozen calls about domestic violence.
I'm really concerned about the side of your face here.
The abusers come from all different backgrounds and neighborhoods. All they appear to have in common before the hitting starts is that most have been drinking or taking drugs or both.
They've been in a 5-year relationship already, and this is the second time this has happened within 2.5 years.
Any alcohol involved here?
Both parties part. What I need you to do is put an X where he struck you, in the nose.
According to Officer Reese, there is also this. Very often, family violence is a family secret.
People consider what goes on in their own home very private. A lot of people feel, well, what I do in my own home is my own business. I can handle this. We don't need the police to be here.
What do we got?
If it is hard for them to ask for help, there's no question that abused women need it. National groups say many will try to leave their abusers 5 or 6 times before they actually manage to get away.
Do you have a general goal in these cases?
To stop the violence. To stop the violence and to try to reinforce peace in the home and peace in the family, peace in the community. I mean, if court orders would work and if people follow them, then people can rely on this as an instrument for protection.
Last year, the sheriff's office delivered more than 1,700 of these restraining orders signed by the judge.
Cap, what I've got is a restraining order here for you.
Okay. These deputies showed up suddenly at this house with no-nonsense instructions.
It is hereby ordered that you, the defendant, are not to contact, threaten, molest, or injure the plaintiff wherever she may be found. Do not touch, talk, or write to the plaintiff for any reason.
Do you ever worry that a woman gets a restraining order and it gives her a false sense of security?
Yeah, I do worry about that. I will say every day to the people who are there, we don't know whether this particular person will obey the restraining order or not. And in case they don't, you have to have a safety plan. You have to think through what will you do if this person violates the restraining order, if I'm put in danger again, and make that plan and follow through with it.
Can I ask you a question? How can your wife do that to you?
She feels threatened. She feels she doesn't feel safe at this residence. Evidently, there was some sort of an altercation. She can go down to the protective orders court and she can get the restraining order. And that's exactly what she's done.
What kind of rights do I have?
You have a right to go to the hearing. You got everything?
It is a stunning and sometimes angry encounter, as with this man, manager of a consulting firm whose 10-year marriage has collapsed into a 15-minute grace period to get out of his house.
All right, look, come over here. I told you once before, all right? No, I'm not going to tell you again. You're causing more problems for yourself, okay? You need to vacate the premises. You understand me? Do you understand me? Yes, sir.
Moments later, he drove off, and his wife, no longer afraid to be in her own home, returned.
You ran into him even though you didn't want to.
From the time she appeared before Judge St. Joan earlier that afternoon, the whole process took no more than a couple of hours.
What do you hope that the women take away from your courtroom?
I'm hoping that everyone who comes in there, first of all, wakes up, that what they've been through and the process in the courtroom as well helps them to wake up so that they become more aware of what they're doing. Like somebody just sort of says, hey, you got to get yourself together here.
Ready?
Christy Cook lived a violent nightmare for years before she finally fought back through St. John's Court.
If God takes me, then it's different. But I'm not going to let no man take me. Not my life, not take me away from my child.
When we talked to Christy, she was in a shelter for battered women after months of running and hiding.
The first time that he hit you, afterwards, did you think that was, well, that's not going to happen again?
I thought, well, maybe I deserved it and that he wasn't going to do it anymore and that we could go on with our relationship because he said I won't do it no more.
Christy's ex-boyfriend and the father of her child is Jamal Sims. He's been jailed 7 times for beating her, including a felony conviction for assault, behavior that he blames on drinking and his own violent childhood.
How many times did you hit her? 10, 20, 30, 40?
I say about 30 plus.
What was it that she would do that would make you hit her?
She knew the traumas and that I had been through as a child. And she would tend to try to push those buttons. She might keep going and saying the same thing. And I wouldn't know no other way to stop it. Maybe hit her. Then she would be quiet.
Did he ever threaten to kill you?
Yes. Told me if I left him, he would kill me and cut me up in small pieces. Put me in a black bag and bury me up in the mountains. No one would ever find me.
Just 5 days after Jamal was released from jail for an earlier attack, there was another beating, a terrible beating.
How bad did it get?
The last time he hit me, he broke my jaw.
You hit her more than once. You hit her again and again?
Yes.
You grabbed her by the hair and flipped over?
Yes.
Then you hit her again?
Yeah.
Now you get tears in your eyes and you cry now. You didn't cry when you hit her.
No.
Christy spent over 3 hours in the operating room with doctors trying to repair the damage. That arrow on the bottom of the x-ray is pointing to her jaw. The jagged line is where it was broken.
When you sobered up and saw pictures of her with black eyes, swollen face, broken jaw, and you knew you had caused that, what did you think?
That I was turning out like my dad. Made me feel like an animal.
Do you think that batterers can get help through psychological treatment?
I think some can. I think the research is not very encouraging because unfortunately for some batterers, they just go from one woman to the next.
Is this the break?
Yep. It went right through the bed of the tooth.
Will I ever get the filling back in my jaw?
Probably not. The break went right through where the nerve travels through there. Okay, open your mouth real wide for me.
Jamal's attack actually knocked loose all of Christy's teeth. They've been wired in place for 5 months, and today the wires come off.
Okay, just take a rest.
I never feel the pain that she felt. They could send me to jail forever, but I'll never feel the pain that she felt. And that's why it hurts. Because I can't get that back to her, no matter what I do.
For the months of suffering he caused, the broken bones, the cracked teeth, the pain and fear, Jamal Sims served less than 2 months in jail. He could go back for 3 years if he even comes near Christy again. And she believes that someday he will try.
I'm terrified. I'm scared of him seeing me on the bus. I'm scared of him seeing me walking down the street, because he'll look for me. I think he's capable of killing me.
Christy Cook may never really feel safe again because she believes her life could end the way Margot Green's did. Probably every woman who's been beaten lives with that fear.
What do you think when you hear the term domestic violence? Does it make you think of a woman with a black eye, bruises?
It would be easier for Margot's mother to hide away the lessons of her daughter's life.
If a guy walked up to you on your first date and punched you in the mouth, you wouldn't go out with him again.
Instead, Ginger Green has transformed Margot's murder into a personal mission to save other young lives.
Physical abuse.
In schools and community meetings all around Denver, she tells the story of domestic violence and the death of Margot Green.
Her death has been so real and has touched so many people that they truly have identified with Margot and realized this could happen to me.